Unlocking urban potential, proposed zoning reforms aim to reduce housing costs near transit stations by 50%. Date, July 9, 2025. Overview. In response to escalating housing costs and urban housing crises, proposed zoning reforms are being championed to reduce housing prices by 50% in areas near transit stations. This initiative seeks to unlock urban potential by increasing the availability of affordable housing, thus addressing both economic and social challenges faced by growing urban populations. Key points and common themes. 1. Zoning reforms and housing affordability. Current zoning laws often impose restrictions that hinder the development of multifamily housing units, contributing to the rising costs of housing. The proposed reforms aim to relax these restrictions, facilitating the construction of diverse housing options including duplexes, triplexes, and affordable apartment complexes adjacent to transit stations. By allowing more units to be built in accessible areas, the reforms target a significant reduction in housing costs. 2. Transit accessibility. The importance of transit accessibility cannot be overstated when discussing housing demand. Areas near transit stations are typically more desirable for residents due to their connectivity to employment centers and amenities. By increasing the housing supply in these regions, the proposed zoning reforms aim to alleviate market pressure, ultimately leading to reduced housing costs. Access to public transportation can enhance quality of life, reduce commute times, and improve overall urban mobility. 3. Economic and social benefits. The economic implications of these zoning reforms are substantial. They promise job creation during the construction phase and potential long-term economic gains from increased population density. More residents can lead to a bustling local economy with increased demand for goods and services. Socially, these reforms could improve the quality of life for residents, providing them with more affordable living options while reducing commute times and enhancing community engagement. 4. Environmental considerations. Another critical aspect of the reforms is their environmental impact. Increasing housing density near transit stations could significantly curb reliance on personal vehicles, contributing to lower greenhouse gas emissions. This shift aligns with broader sustainability goals and urban planning strategies aimed at creating greener, more livable cities. By promoting public transit use, cities can work towards reducing their carbon footprints and fostering a healthier urban environment. Differences between sources. While there is a consensus on the benefits of zoning reforms, various sources present differing perspectives on implementation. Some sources provide detailed case studies from cities like Portland and Seattle showcasing successful reforms that led to increased housing stock and stabilized prices. Others focus on theoretical frameworks and policy implications, lacking specific examples. Additionally, the projected timelines for these reforms vary, with some advocating for immediate action and others suggesting a more gradual, phased approach. Use cases and data. Data from cities that have implemented similar reforms, such as Portland and Seattle, indicate that increasing housing stock through zoning changes can lead to moderate decreases in housing costs. For instance, studies show stabilization in housing prices in neighborhoods adjacent to transit stations following such reforms. These case studies serve as critical benchmarks for cities considering similar zoning changes. Timeline of events. 1. Initial proposals. Early 2020s, the discussion surrounding zoning reforms began to gain traction as cities grappled with rising housing prices and affordability crises. 2. Public consultations. Mid-2022, municipalities engaged in public consultations to discuss potential zoning changes, gathering feedback from community stakeholders to assess needs and concerns. 3. Drafting of reforms. Late 2022, draft proposals for zoning reforms were created, outlining specific strategies to increase housing density near transit hubs. For pilot programs. Early 2023, select neighborhoods launched pilot programs to test the impacts of the proposed reforms, analyzing their effects on housing availability and costs. 5. Legislative action. Mid-2023, some cities began passing legislation to formalize zoning changes with ambitious goals of achieving a 50% reduction in housing costs by 2025. Conclusion. Proposed zoning reforms aimed at reducing housing costs near transit stations are gaining momentum as a strategic solution to urban housing challenges. By unlocking urban potential and promoting affordable housing options, these reforms could reshape cities into more inclusive, accessible spaces. The integration of data and case studies supports the argument for reform, while the diversity of opinions and timelines reflects the complex landscape of urban policy development. As urban populations continue to grow, the need for innovative solutions to housing affordability becomes increasingly urgent. The proposed zoning reforms represent a significant step forward in addressing these challenges, emphasizing the importance of accessibility, economic growth, and environmental sustainability in urban planning. By implementing these changes thoughtfully and collaboratively, cities can pave the way for a more equitable and sustainable future. The proposed zoning reforms aimed at reducing housing costs near transit stations by 50% presents several counterintuitive insights that challenge conventional assumptions about urban planning and housing markets. Here are some of the key counterintuitive points identified in the content. 1. Increased density can lead to affordability. It might seem logical to assume that increasing the number of housing units in desirable areas would lead to higher prices due to increased demand. However, the proposed reforms suggest that by allowing for more multifamily housing developments, the overall housing supply can meet demand more effectively, ultimately leading to a decrease in prices. This counters the typical narrative that higher density always leads to higher costs. 2. Transit accessibility does not automatically guarantee affordability. While it is often assumed that proximity to transit automatically raises housing costs due to desirability, the reforms propose that enabling more affordable housing options in these areas can actually stabilize or reduce prices. This indicates that active policy measures such as zoning reform can counteract market forces that typically drive prices up in high-demand locations. 3. Environmental benefits from increased population density. It might be expected that increasing housing density could lead to more congestion and strain on local resources. However, the reforms posit that higher density near transit stations can promote greater use of public transportation, reducing reliance on cars and subsequently lowering greenhouse gas emissions. This presents a surprising benefit of urban density that may not be immediately apparent. For economic growth through housing affordability, one might assume that reducing housing costs could hinder economic growth due to lower property values and tax revenues. In contrast, the proposed reforms argue that increasing affordable housing near transit can stimulate local economies by attracting a diverse population, which can enhance demand for local businesses, services, and jobs. 5. Public opposition to zoning changes can be mitigated. It is often believed that any proposed changes to zoning laws will meet with significant resistance from existing residents concerned about changes in neighborhood character. However, the reforms suggest that if the benefits of increased affordability and improved public transit are clearly communicated and demonstrated through pilot programs, public acceptance may increase. This counters the assumption that community resistance is insurmountable. 6. Long-term stability over short-term gains. Many stakeholders in urban development may prioritize short-term profits from high-value properties. The proposed reforms challenge this by emphasizing that long-term stability in housing markets can be achieved through strategic zoning changes that promote a mix of housing types rather than focusing solely on maximizing immediate financial returns. 7. Legislative action is not always slow. There is a common perception that governmental processes are inherently slow and cumbersome, particularly regarding zoning reforms. However, the timeline outlined in the proposed reforms indicates that with community engagement and political will, significant changes can be enacted relatively quickly, as evidenced by some cities moving from proposals to legislation within a year. 8. Pilot programs can provide unexpected insights. While pilot programs are typically viewed as small-scale tests that may not reflect broader outcomes, the data from these initiatives can lead to unexpected insights about community needs and preferences. The reforms suggest that these programs can reveal the potential for increased density and affordability in ways that comprehensive plans cannot. These counterintuitive insights highlight the complexities of urban housing policy and challenge prevailing assumptions, suggesting that with innovative approaches, cities can successfully address housing affordability while fostering sustainable growth. The report on proposed zoning reforms to reduce housing costs by 50% near transit stations presents several critical insights that many readers may overlook. These overlooked aspects are significant due to their potential impact on the effectiveness of the reforms, the political landscape, and the overall urban environment. 1. Community engagement and resistance to change. While the report highlights public consultations as a mechanism for gathering feedback from community stakeholders, it often underplays the potential resistance from existing residents. Many communities exhibit NIMBY, not in my backyard sentiments, where residents oppose new developments due to fears of increased traffic, changes in neighborhood character, or declining property values. This resistance can delay or complicate the implementation of zoning reforms. Significance: understanding local sentiments is crucial for successful reform. If community concerns are not adequately addressed, the reforms may face significant pushback that could stall progress or lead to watered-down policies that fail to achieve intended outcomes. Engaging communities through transparent dialogue and education about the benefits of increased density is essential to mitigate resistance. 2. Equity considerations. The report mentions the economic and social benefits of zoning reforms but may not sufficiently address how these changes impact various demographic groups, particularly marginalized communities. There is a risk that reforms could lead to gentrification, displacing lower-income residents from neighborhoods that become more desirable due to new developments. Significance: equity considerations are paramount in urban planning. Ensuring that zoning reforms include provisions for affordable housing and protect vulnerable populations can help create inclusive communities. Policymakers must develop strategies to balance development with the needs of existing residents to avoid exacerbating social inequalities. 3. Long-term implications of increased density. The report outlines the immediate benefits of increased housing density near transit stations, such as reduced commute times and enhanced quality of life. However, it may overlook the long-term implications that higher density can have on infrastructure, public services, and community cohesion. Increased population density can strain existing infrastructure, including schools, parks, and public transport systems, if not planned adequately. Significance: while increased density can lead to economic benefits, it also requires careful planning to ensure that infrastructure and services can accommodate growth. Failing to plan for these long-term implications can result in overcrowded facilities and diminished quality of life, ultimately undermining the goals of the zoning reforms. 4. Political will and governance challenges. The timeline for implementing zoning reforms varies significantly across different municipalities, reflecting differing levels of political will. The report may not fully capture the political dynamics that influence the success of these reforms, such as the role of local government, the influence of lobbying groups, and partisan politics. Significance: the political landscape plays a crucial role in determining whether zoning reforms will be enacted and maintained. Understanding the governance structures and potential obstacles can help advocates devise more effective strategies for promoting and sustaining these reforms. 5. Economic diversification and job creation. While the report mentions job creation during construction, it may overlook the potential for long-term economic diversification that could arise from increasing housing supply. By attracting a diverse population, including young professionals and families, cities can foster a more vibrant local economy that supports various industries and businesses. Significance: promoting a mixed-use development approach that includes residential, commercial, and recreational spaces can lead to sustainable economic growth. This comprehensive perspective on economic development can enhance the overall effectiveness of zoning reforms. 6. Environmental justice and sustainability. The environmental benefits of reduced reliance on cars are mentioned, but the report may not delve deeply into how zoning reforms can intersect with environmental justice issues. Low-income communities often bear the brunt of environmental degradation and climate change impacts. Significance: addressing environmental justice in the context of zoning reforms can create synergistic benefits, ensuring that all communities have equitable access to green spaces, clean air, and sustainable infrastructure. Policymakers should consider how to incorporate sustainability practices that benefit all demographics. 7. Data-driven decision-making. Although the report references data from cities like Portland and Seattle, it may not emphasize the importance of using data analytics in the planning and implementation phases of zoning reforms. Data can provide insights into housing demand, demographics, and infrastructure needs that can guide more informed decision-making. Significance: leveraging data analytics can enhance the effectiveness of zoning reforms by ensuring that policies are tailored to the specific needs and contexts of different neighborhoods. Data-driven approaches can also help track progress and make adjustments as needed. Conclusion: the proposed zoning reforms aimed at reducing housing costs near transit stations are poised to unlock significant urban potential. However, the nuances and complexities surrounding community engagement, equity, long-term implications, political dynamics, economic diversification, environmental justice, and data-driven decision-making are critical to the success of these reforms. Addressing these often overlooked aspects can lead to more sustainable, inclusive, and effective urban development strategies. Policymakers, advocates, and community members must work collaboratively to navigate these challenges and maximize the benefits of zoning reforms for all urban residents. 1. Zoning reforms and housing affordability. The proposed zoning reforms are primarily focused on altering existing zoning laws that currently limit multifamily housing development. By relaxing these restrictions, the reforms aim to provide a wider array of affordable housing options near transit stations. This is critical because the lack of affordable housing is a significant factor contributing to rising housing costs. The discussion surrounding these reforms underscores the necessity of enabling diverse housing types such as duplexes and triplexes, which can cater to a broader demographic, including low and middle income families. 2. Transit accessibility. The importance of transit accessibility is a recurring theme in discussions about housing demand and affordability. Areas close to transit stations typically experience higher demand for housing due to their connectivity and convenience for commuters. By increasing housing supply in these transit-rich areas, the proposed reforms not only aim to alleviate housing market pressures but also strive to make urban living more feasible for individuals and families who rely heavily on public transportation. This connection between transit accessibility and housing demand highlights the need for integrated urban planning that prioritizes both transportation and housing policy. 3. Economic and social benefits. The economic implications of zoning reforms extend beyond just increasing housing supply. The construction of new housing units is expected to generate jobs and stimulate local economies. Furthermore, the long-term social benefits include reduced commute times for residents, leading to an overall improved quality of life. The reforms are posited as a means to foster more vibrant urban communities where increased population density can support local businesses and enhance the social fabric of neighborhoods. This multifaceted approach to urban development illustrates how zoning reforms can serve as a catalyst for broader economic and societal improvements. 4. Environmental considerations. An important aspect of the proposed zoning reforms is their potential environmental impact. By promoting higher housing density near transit stations, the reforms encourage a reduction in car dependency, which can lead to lower greenhouse gas emissions. This aligns with larger sustainability goals and urban planning strategies aimed at creating more livable, environmentally friendly cities. The emphasis on environmental considerations in the context of zoning reforms highlights the growing recognition of the interconnectedness of housing policy, transportation, and climate change mitigation efforts. These 4 points encapsulate the core arguments and implications of the proposed zoning reforms aimed at reducing housing costs near transit stations. Each point invites further discussion and analysis regarding the potential benefits and challenges associated with implementing such reforms in urban settings. Here are 3 famous historical cases of urban zoning reforms aimed at increasing housing affordability and accessibility. 1. Minneapolis 2040 Plan 2018. In December 2018, Minneapolis became the first major city in the United States to eliminate single-family zoning across the entire city. The Minneapolis 2040 Plan allows for the construction of multi-family housing in neighborhoods previously restricted to single-family homes. This zoning reform aims to increase the supply of affordable housing, reduce racial segregation, and promote sustainability by encouraging transit-oriented development. The city anticipates that these changes will lead to greater housing density near transit stations and ultimately help mitigate the housing crisis faced by many residents. 2. Tokyo's zoning reforms 2000s. Over the years, Tokyo has implemented a series of zoning reforms that have contributed to its reputation for affordable urban living despite its high population density. The city's approach has focused on deregulating land use and allowing for mixed-use developments which enable residential, commercial, and industrial spaces to coexist. These reforms have facilitated the construction of smaller apartments and multi-family housing units, particularly near transit stations, thereby increasing housing supply and keeping costs relatively low compared to other global cities. Tokyo's flexibility in zoning has resulted in a more vibrant urban environment, supporting a high quality of life while maintaining economic vitality. 3. Portland's Residential Infill Project 2017. Portland, Oregon initiated the Residential Infill Project to address the city's housing shortage and rising costs. The project includes zoning reforms that allow for the development of duplexes, triplexes, and other multi-family housing units in single-family zones. This initiative is designed to increase the availability of affordable housing options while promoting density near transit lines. By accommodating a wider variety of housing types, Portland aims to create more inclusive neighborhoods and reduce reliance on automobiles, aligning with sustainability goals. The project reflects a broader trend in urban planning to adapt zoning laws to meet the needs of growing populations while addressing affordability challenges. These cases illustrate the potential impact and benefits of zoning reforms aimed at increasing housing accessibility and affordability, particularly in urban areas with high demand for housing near transit infrastructure. The future outlook for proposed zoning reforms aimed at reducing housing costs by 50% near transit stations is both promising and complex. As cities grapple with escalating housing prices and affordability crises, these reforms appear to be a strategic response to unlock urban potential. Here are several predictions and insights into how these reforms might shape urban landscapes over the next decade. 1. Increased housing supply and diversity. Prediction: by 2030, cities that implement zoning reforms will likely see a significant increase in the availability of affordable housing options near transit stations. This will encompass a range of housing types, including multifamily units, townhouses, and co-housing developments. Insight: the relaxation of zoning restrictions is expected to encourage developers to create diverse housing forms that cater to various income levels. As a result, neighborhoods near transit hubs will transform, fostering inclusive communities where a broader demographic can reside. 2. Stabilization of housing prices. Prediction: with an increase in housing supply, housing prices in areas around transit stations could stabilize or even decrease by up to 50% by 2030, particularly in cities that face severe affordability issues. Insight: historical data from cities like Portland and Seattle indicates that similar zoning reforms have led to a moderation in housing prices. The influx of new housing will likely alleviate the intense competition for limited units in transit-rich areas, thereby reducing speculative pricing. 3. Enhanced transit accessibility and urban mobility. Prediction: by 2035, cities implementing effective zoning reforms will likely experience improvements in transit accessibility and urban mobility. This will be reflected in increased public transit ridership and decreased reliance on personal vehicles. Insight: as housing becomes more affordable near transit, more residents will opt for public transportation, leading to enhanced service demand. This shift could prompt cities to invest further in transit infrastructure, creating a virtuous cycle of accessibility and livability. 4. Economic growth and job creation. Prediction: the construction and development spurred by zoning reforms could generate thousands of jobs, contributing to local economies and possibly resulting in a 2 to 3% increase in job growth in urban areas by 2030. Insight: beyond the immediate job creation during construction, the long-term economic benefits will arise from increased population density. More residents will lead to higher demand for local businesses, services, and amenities, thus driving economic vitality in these neighborhoods. 5. Environmental sustainability. Prediction: urban areas that adopt zoning reforms will likely see a measurable reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, with a potential decrease of 15 to 20% in emissions from transportation-related sources by 2030. Insight: by promoting higher density living and reducing car dependency. These zoning changes align with broader sustainability goals. An increase in green spaces and sustainable building practices in conjunction with higher density could further enhance urban environments. 6. Social equity and community cohesion. Prediction: the successful implementation of zoning reforms could lead to improved social equity outcomes, with a decrease in income segregation and increased access to amenities and services for low and middle income families by 2030. Insight: by fostering mixed-income neighborhoods, zoning reforms can counteract the historical patterns of exclusionary zoning that have marginalized certain communities. This shift can promote community cohesion and resilience, enhancing the overall quality of life for residents. 7. Challenges and resistance. Prediction: despite the positive outlook, resistance to zoning reforms may persist, particularly from established neighborhoods concerned about changes to their character and potential increases in density. Insight: ongoing public engagement and education will be crucial in addressing concerns and building consensus. Successful cities will likely implement phased reforms and pilot programs to demonstrate the benefits and manage community expectations. 8. Long-term policy evolution. Prediction: by 2035, zoning reform will likely become a standard policy framework in urban planning as cities adapt to evolving housing needs and sustainability goals. Insight: as the effectiveness of these reforms becomes evident, other cities will adopt similar strategies, leading to a broader national movement toward more flexible and inclusive zoning practices. This could culminate in a paradigm shift in urban policy, prioritizing affordability and accessibility. Conclusion: the future of urban housing and zoning reforms near transit stations holds substantial promise. With the potential to reduce housing costs by 50%, enhance economic vitality, and contribute to environmental sustainability. These reforms are likely to reshape urban landscapes significantly. However, achieving these outcomes will require careful planning, community engagement, and a commitment to addressing the diverse needs of urban populations. As cities continue to evolve, the successful implementation of these zoning reforms could set a precedent for sustainable urban development well into the future.